Hi there, my name's Laura. I'm from the Learning Development Service, and this short screencast entitled How to Study 1 will look at some of the elements around the transition to university. In this session, we'll look at a number of different elements. Firstly, the transition to the higher education learning culture, and that will include some of the academic expectations of you as a learner in higher education. Secondly, we'll look at the concept of independent learning and what that entails. Thirdly, we'll have a look at some student tips for online learning. These come from a student who has previous experience of completing semester 2 last year online. And finally, we'll look at some of the support available to you as a Queen's student, both within and your school and in the professional support services. So it's useful to think about some of the expectations of you as a learner in higher education. This transition to the university learning culture may feel daunting to begin with. It's something that's very different from what may have been expected of you in your previous educational experience, whether that be A-levels or perhaps an access course, maybe further education college. But it's something that you develop, and certainly a lot of skills that you develop as you go along. It's important to recognise that there are certain expectations of you in particular classes, whether those are lectures or tutorials. And we'll go into those in more detail in the third part of this series. In terms of preparation, this is expected of all classes. So whether it's a lecture, even if you're not going to be asked directly on the topic, it's really important that you prepare for that class because you'll get a lot more out of it if you put in some extra work there. When it comes to participation in tutorials, you'll get a lot more out of the experience if you contribute actively. And it's a chance to put forward your own opinions on reading perhaps that you've completed, to give your point of view, but also to ask any questions that you might have about the material that you've read or what might have been covered in a lecture. There are also certain expectations when it comes to self-directed study. So not only when it comes to the scheduled hours in your course, but also what you do outside of those fixed hours. And some of the things that are required there are reading, research and note making. So whether that's further reading on a particular topic to help you clarify your understanding, whether that's further research on something as part of an assignment, or whether it's simply, again, to understand something better, but also in terms of the way you make notes on, for example, extra supplementary readings. There are some basic assumptions made of you as a student at university, namely that you're committed to and you're interested in your subject, that you're willing to work hard to improve or maintain your performance, to, for instance, that you will engage constructively with feedback in order to improve and develop. And finally, that you will gain the confidence to and the know-how to refer yourself for any additional assistance and support where required. And we'll look at some of the support available to you later on in this section. Independent learning is an important part of this transition to higher education. And it may be something that takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's something you'll develop as you go along. A definition of independent learning is that it's about taking charge or taking responsibility for your own learning. And in some ways, it's also about that, taking on that accountability yourself for your progress in your studies. A big part of this is time management, so there'll be a lot of freedom for you to decide how you spend your time. For instance, if you work better at night, if you're a night owl, you may have that flexibility to do some of your work at night, and that's great. But it'll just be a matter of making sure that you put your deadlines in your calendar in advance and you work towards those deadlines, that you assign certain slots for certain key tasks. Engaging with module content is also an important part of learning independently. Most importantly, preparing for your classes, whether lectures or tutorials, and reviewing notes and supplementing your notes outside of that. A really key element that takes a little bit of getting used to also is self-directed study. So figuring out how you learn best and what your own learning needs are, what your preferences are. And your first year is a good time to figure out how you work best and what particular styles work best for you. And I would say a really important part of independent learning throughout your degree programme is ultimately then reflecting on your progress, whether that is in formal feedback from an assignment, but even in terms of how you're progressing yourself, how your study techniques are working, how you feel that things are going, and how much you feel in control of your work, how you're managing your deadlines, for instance. This information is also covered in an independent learning resource. It's a self-paced resource that you can have a look through in your own time at this link here. So independent learning, as we said, can take a little bit of adjustment. These are some tips from a student who's been there and done that. Firstly, reinforcing the importance of planning ahead. So that diary, that calendar where you write down those deadlines and you create then artificial milestones in order to meet those deadlines. That's really essential. Although it might be daunting, again, don't be afraid to ask questions of your tutors and lecturers. Ultimately, they have consultation or office hours. If you don't feel confident to ask a question in front of your peers, you can always email them, you can always get in touch with them during those office hours. And it's really important that if there's anything you don't understand, you don't just leave it and forget about it, that you actively try to improve your understanding. Although you might find it a little bit challenging to start with, the important thing is there's a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility when it comes to self-directed learning. You can choose your pace, you can choose to spend time on a particular topic that really interests you. You might have the flexibility in terms of questions that you answer for coursework. So there's a lot of independence and a lot of flexibility here, and that's something to be enjoyed. You won't absolutely have to do any particular type of task. You have that flexibility to explore your learning on your own. And this is also a good time to experiment with different techniques. So just because you've always taken notes in a particular way, this might be a time to try a slightly different technique. And it's good at this point to find out what works for you through trial and error. In the particular context of online learning, these are some tips from students who have spent the second part of semester 2 last year working online. So these are some tips from experience. First one is that you can replay and rewatch sections of lectures that you receive and note down any questions. This is important because you can have that timestamp where you might identify a particularly important section of a lecture. The slight caveat to this is that you have to be aware of replaying everything. It's better to be listening actively the first time and making notes rather than listening to the full lecture again. Secondly, making that effort to participate fully. Again, although it may be a little bit daunting, you'll get a lot more out of your classes, particularly tutorials, the more interactive format, if you contribute questions, if you add your own thoughts. Again, in the online learning context, it's important that you make the most of these kind of social interactions, whether it is in a tutorial or whether it might be through a peer mentoring session, whether it's in the Freshers Fair, the society meetups, it's really important that you make the most of those to stay connected with your peers. Practically then, when it comes to studying, if you can, try to find a designated space where you work. So it may be a corner of the room that you also then relax in, but try to find a quiet space away from distractions. Identify and avoid those distractions as much as you can. And it might be that you ask the people that you live with not to interrupt you for a certain period while you're taking part in a class. Although again, there are obviously things that can't be expected, that can't be foreseen, but try to avoid distractions as much as you can. For instance, it's very easy for us all to resort to social media, to watching Netflix, to trying to multitask, for instance, while we are trying to concentrate on a particular recorded session, but try to use these other elements like social media or Netflix as incentives at the end of the day, or for when you're taking a break from your work. And in the subject of taking a break, it's really essential that you take those regular breaks. Screen time can be exhausting, so make sure that you get regular breaks away, whether that's going outside and having a walk, whether that's picking up a book instead. That kind of variation really helps to refresh your mind. Another important aspect of being an independent learner is coming to know when you need to seek support or when additional support would be beneficial to you. There is a huge amount of support available to you as a student, both within your school. For instance, through the personal tutor scheme, this is someone who helps you to keep an eye on your academic progress over the course of the year, but also your advisor of studies, who would be handle the more administrative side, for instance, if you need to change modules, or indeed if you want to change course, for instance. But there are also a huge number of services in the student services, most of them located either in the Student Guidance Centre across the road from the Lanyon building, or indeed in the new Students' Union building on Elmwood Avenue. We'll talk a little bit in more detail about the Learning Development Service. When it comes to, for example, careers, employability and skills, be aware that the service is available to all students, not just those in final year, and that there are opportunities that they present across your degree programme and across the period of you being at university. So it's important that you engage with them where you can in order to make the most of some of those opportunities. The Wellbeing Service, similarly, is available to all students in the university. They offer counselling, they offer a lot of self-help resources online. They offer drop-in sessions. They also offer a counselling service. So, and indeed they offer a programme of events throughout the semesters. For instance, pinning puppies coming up to exam periods, different events, yoga sessions like that, that you can avail of for free as a student. Disability services, it's important to know, they are a service available to students who declare a disability, and they can offer support with note-taking, they can offer exam prompting, they can offer study skills tutors, for example. Those are some of the resources that are available as required by students. Student finance, also available for fees and funding support in the Student Guidance Centre, and Advice SU, importantly located in the Students' Union building. It offers advice from accommodation and financial advice to education advice. For instance, if a student finds themselves on a plagiarism committee, they're entitled to advocacy from Advice SU. A really key source of support is also in the peer mentor scheme. So peer mentors are students who are more experienced in their course, so for instance, who are going into level 2 or level 3 from your school, who have been in your position and can offer some advice and some support with the benefit of experience. They're an important point of contact. They can answer questions, for instance, you might feel too shy to ask a tutor or a lecturer, and they can signpost you to any relevant support. Within this pack, there will be a link to a video from the lead peer mentor in HAPP, JP. So he'll explain some of the key elements of the scheme and what peer mentors can do for you. And finally then, touching briefly on the Learning Development Service. We offer academic skills support for undergraduate students across the university, and our offering is threefold. Firstly, we offer a lot of online resources, and you'll see the link here. These are really valuable resources. For instance, we have an essay writing guide, we have a site to write reference generator, we have a lot of different resources for different skills areas, whether that's presentation skills, study skills, time management, or any other kind of academic writing. We also offer in-module embedded workshops aligned to learning outcomes and assignments. And crucially, for your own knowledge, we also offer one-to-one appointments, which are currently taking place online, virtually via Microsoft Teams. These offer a 1 hour space in which you can explore your learning, and that may be discussing your time management if you're feeling a little overwhelmed with deadlines. This may be bringing in a draft of a piece of work where we can offer non-subject specific advice, for instance, on structure or on referencing or in many other different academic skills areas. And you can get in touch with us to book an appointment through My Future, via email or via telephone. There are 2 more sessions in this series, focusing on writing skills and then on finding your voice at university, specifically the expectations around tutorials and lectures. Thanks very much for your attention and good luck. I hope to see you soon.